So thanks and welcome to the March edition of the Cloud Office Hours for Planet Technologies. Today we're going to talk about our enterprise cloud readiness solution for Azure for roughly 30 minutes. Then we'll have a security update from Jeff Fowler, and then we'll be open to any of your questions on both the topics, whether they be the security update, the ECR topic of the day, or in fact any other questions you might have related to cloud technologies. So you already own a team. Myself, Bob Ballard, Principal Cloud Strategist. We also have Jerry Martin, Senior Cloud Strategist, and Aaron Ward and George Scott, who are also cloud strategists added to the team fairly recently over the last few months. Keeping us in check is Mary Tucker, making sure that the updates and notifications get sent out, etc. And of course, our Vice President, Steve Winter. So important, right? As a You Already Own It customer, don't forget that you can email the You Already Own It at goplanet.com. You can email at You Already Own It at goplanet.com. Any of your questions, around, this is not for, hey, I have an emergency, something's broken, because obviously there's not that kind of SLA there, but hey, we're struggling with trying to figure out what to do with groups and teams or whatever it might be. We got questions or concerns around what to do in Azure, questions with what to do in Azure. So, just feel free to use it. And without any further ado, we'll get right into it because we do have a jam-packed agenda today. I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Ward to talk about our enterprise cloud readiness.
Thank you, Bob. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Ward. I am a cloud strategist with Planet Technologies, and honored that you're all here on this call and joining us for learning more about some of our offerings, specifically surrounding the enterprise cloud readiness for Azure itself specifically. Just to give a highlight, realistically, when Planet's been working in the cloud space for over 3 years, and actually a significant amount of years, but over the last 3 years, as we've been working with our customers in Office 365 and Azure, we really determined that a lot of our customers are in need of a framework that will enable them to adopt cloud technologies or be able to transition themselves from an on-premises current environment over into the cloud environment accordingly. And when we look at how we got there, a lot of our customers were dealing with cloud analysis paralysis, meaning that, we have no idea what it's going to cost. How are we going to plan for the future? How do we budget things accordingly? Is it really cheaper if we adopt cloud? To cloud sprawl, whether this was with Office 365 or currently with Azure, how do we manage, how many users or how many VMs that we're going to have out there? Are we going to allow just, the normal day-to-day practices that we do today where someone requests for a VM and it might be running within our VMware or Hyper-V environment? We just allow it to run forever, thinking that we may not actually incur costs, but we do incur costs on premises, but we can actually visually see that possibly in the cloud. Two, lack of policies and procedures. How do we handle data governance? How do we manage and handle both CGIS and IRS 1075 PubSec, as well as some common certifications or security concerns around HIPAA, or possibly for education customers, FERPA, et cetera. And then finally, how do we acquire the insights into our environments to be able to manage it and ensure that we have security, et cetera. And so all this together, we really found ourselves stalling or not being able to really take that next step into cloud technologies. So at Planet Technologies, we've gone ahead and we created what we call our Enterprise Cloud and Assessment Readiness, or ECR. And what this really enables us to do as a partner to your organization is to create a data center lifecycle, which will consist of both technical workshops that really the whole goal here is to drive decisions. And so knowing what our costs are, to be able to have a framework that enables us to develop basically an enterprise-based data center for our organization, which is unique to anybody else, as well as determining what those actual costs will be for operating our data center. Now, keep in mind, all organizations, whether they're large or small, you're planning for how to utilize the cloud. And a lot of scenarios that we are dealing with is how do we get there? We have ideas of some of the low-hanging fruits of there's cheaper storage, virtualization or compute is possibly lower cost. There's this whole paradigm of platform as a service that we may want to take advantage of, and then of course there's all the advanced cloud compute that we're thinking about, such as might be chatbots. It could be how do we start looking at new ways to prevent fraud, utilizing like machine learning, or possibly looking at our data differently with data lakes, etc. But realistically, when we start getting into those endpoints, we start realizing how that we don't really have a good architectural plan, not only from a cost perspective, but how do we handle this from a security? How do we implement this holistically for an organization to transform itself? And keep in mind, from an IT organization, we are typically providing services to our constituents, which could be our agencies or departments and citizens. But really, we got to be thinking about is how do we transform as an organization holistically, both from what can we possibly offer from cloud services to even our cloud maturity aspect of how we can adopt cloud practices. And so as we look at that from an organization-wide aspect, we really need to get our core foundation set up. The foundations for our home needs to be solid. It needs to be able to be built on top of granite or cement. And that's really our goal here, is to enable those foundations for a very successful virtual enterprise data center with decisions that are decided for not only your current initiatives, but all future initiatives. And when we started really thinking about how customers would like to move forward, is we really started thinking about data centers as a life cycle. And through our experiences with multiple engagements of Azure specifically, we've discovered that all customers move at their own pace. Some customers are very cloud mature in the sense of that, not only have they started the transformation of how they're going to offer services to their agencies or departments, but also they've transformed, some other aspects of their organization, such as development operations. How are we going to become more agile? How are we going to think about moving forward? But then I have other organizations that are the complete opposite, saying that, we just don't have the manpower and we don't have the budget to really replace a data center or add a data center to really provide the service level agreement that we would like to provide to our agencies or departments. And so realistically, when we think about the ECR, think about it as truly a data center lifecycle. And it's multiple phases, which could be, it could be adopted quickly, or it could be adopted through an extensive period of time, all dependent on how your organization operates. So when we think about these different phases, it all starts out realistically with a cloud assessment. And the goal of the cloud assessment is really to look at your data center and figure out what's truly there. It provides both insight for yourself as well as Plant Technologies to be able to look at how many VMs are truly in the organization, what are those dependency matrices, such as do we have a certain workload that may have 100 to 200 VMs or workloads, applications that are connecting to it, and what would the what could be that migration path for that application into the cloud, to actually getting an ROI document, and keep in mind, when I say ROI document, your return on investment or your total cost of ownership of your current data center and what that could possibly look like within Azure. Most of our customers, after running this assessment, we do utilize standards throughout whether it be state, local government, or education, to baseline what a data center will cost. But if you do have those actual costs for, power, how we're, handling cooling, administrative dollars, et cetera. We're able to plug that in as well to actually refine that to, instead of it being a ballpark figure, to being a very accurate figure of what is our total cost of ownership with our own data center, as well as what could be our total cost savings within Azure itself. And a lot of our customers on average are seeing anywhere between 30 to 40% cost savings by being able to lift and shift their current environment up into Azure, and then even additional savings by going ahead and doing workload transformation. Now, keep in mind when we're looking at these different phases, and this is your typical organization that would be, well, we're not sure how to adopt Azure, and we're not sure how to adopt moving forward. This really enables us to take small bites of that big, large elephant to be able to get us to where we would like to go. So when we think about, you keep hearing me say, what's this virtual data center, this enterprise virtual data center? Well, in essence, what the ECR Virtual Data Center really does is it allows us to look at this whole entire methodology of how to design a cloud-based data center. To be able to take in consideration data governance, meaning that, if I have public safety information, where should I put that? Should that be in Azure Commercial? Should that be in Azure Government? If it is in Azure Government, how do we manage subscriptions? All the way down to some of the policies and procedures in order to maintain CJIS certifications, such as, well, if I have to have background checks, should that take into consideration of how I would architect out that portion of Azure, to also network design, et cetera. So when we're looking at the full entire enterprise data center model, and I apologize here, I went a little bit fast on my thumbnails. When we're looking at it, it really enables us to do all these technical architectural workshops and make true decisions. So instead of having there's a million different ways to implement Azure for your organization, it comes back down to understanding how your organization operates today, where you want to go, and then making decisions based on one or two options, possibly three options, of what would be best to architect and design that virtual data center. Now, when we go ahead and we work together on this, enables us to really take all of the processes that we're used to today for on-premises, that will be including, from the CISO's perspective, Chief Security Officer, all the way down to, data backup and storage and retrieval. How would we actually mandate and figure out how we're going to manage this within this this new paradox that we're going to be in? Now, keep in mind, cloud is completely different than we're dealing with on-premises, but these concepts aren't. So it's being aware, being able to go ahead and say, okay, we weren't thinking about like VNet pairing. How would we handle maybe a hub-spoke model? We weren't thinking about RBAC, which is role-based access control. We weren't thinking about how we charge back. How do we... we understand that there's going to be a cost, but, what should be the methodology and procedure for being able to do a chargeback and getting that information back and be proactive to our quote-unquote customers on what it is that they're consuming within the cloud. And realistically, it doesn't matter how big or small your organization is. Every IT organization goes through the same principles for designing, architecting, and securing an enterprise virtual data center. So when we're moving through this, when we think about like a virtual data center, what it might perhaps look like, just to give you a visual concept, is you have your typical on-premises environment that you have today, and then we're going to be looking at some type of connectivity. It could be ExpressRoute, which is a dedicated connection within to Azure. Most of our, I would say, a significant portion of our customers require an ExpressRoute due to the client connectivity requirements that they have, but there's also considerations of dedicated VPN or backup VPN connectivity, which with Microsoft everly increasing VPN connectivity from 250 megs now up to a gig. Some of those connections for some of our smaller customers may be just good enough, and we go through all of that. But really, we're looking at more of this hub-spoke model, meaning that we have a hub of where all of our security exists. It means that no matter how I deploy Azure, whether it's a subscription, if it's resource groups, if it's objects that are within those resource groups and subscriptions, they're all going to follow a similar or same security mantra across the whole entire board. And that includes from networking to naming standards to how we're going to tag our whole entire environment. And then finally, how we're going to enforce policies, meaning that we're going to ensure that nothing actually changes within this environment and nothing goes quote unquote rogue. Really enables us as an organization to be able to control costs, predict costs, and know what those monthly expenditures should be, and then also be able to get to an annual budget. So when we get back to the data center lifecycle, typically we've gone through the cloud assessment. We've gone ahead and we've gone through designing and actually implementing the initial virtual data center with your organization. And then usually at this point is we start looking at attacking how we're going to actually migrate. And there's two different methods for the data center migration. One is obviously a lift and shift, where we take what we have today and we go ahead and we utilize like Azure Site Recovery templates and right sizing, not only based on what our data center assessment tool provides us, but as well as what's realistic, meaning like, let's say I have a web server that is running with NetApp boxes in the background, and those NetApp servers are actually providing, let's say, 10,000 IOPS for everything that's connected to it. Well, from the assessment tool, it may see that server actually utilizing more IOPS and more processing power than is really needed. Well, we have a methodology that enables our customers to work through and analyze and determine, not only based on what the recommendations are for right-sizing the server is, but also then fine-tuning that, and then also placing that server, whether or not we should do just a standard lift and shift, or maybe we should be looking at this as a true modernization or transformation. As an example, it might be is that where you have a lot of static websites. Does it make sense for us from an administrative perspective to maintain those and manage those VMs? Or does it make more sense for us to go ahead and start implementing change management and also policy management and leverage platform as a service, where we can lift and shift that from IaaS over to PaaS and see obviously significant cost savings from there as well. So just to give you an idea of some of the workshops that we go through, with phase one, there's a kickoff. We do a data center assessment within your environment. We validate that data, and then we also we do customer development operation standards, meaning that during this whole process, this is not just an infrastructure-only engagement. We really look at your organization holistically, meaning that it's not just the infrastructure folks that need to be involved in networking, but also your development teams, if you have any development teams on staff. So we look at everything holistically to be able to come back and provide you really with a cloud assessment of how your organization is and where we should move forward with. The next phase is really that whole IaaS foundations, like I was just talking about, where we make all those decisions, such as Azure Site Recovery, how we're going to do backup and disaster recovery, how we're going to implement the initial deployment and configuration of your tenants or tenancies, right? Depending on if you're a government customer, more than likely if you have public safety or you have any IRS 1075 PubSec related certification requirements, you're going to actually have 2 data governances within your environment. For a lot of our commercial and education customers, they will all actually leverage just one data governance model, which will be the Azure commercial space. So, but it's being able to determine that and also setting that up accordingly within our environments. Usually on phase 3, it's about workload assessment and prioritization. Like I mentioned, we have a process that we teach you how to fish, so that way you're able to prioritize and create the workloads. We also assist you within creating those Azure Site Recovery templates, meaning that we utilize the existing cloud-based tools to migrate VMs from on-premises up to Azure itself as an IaaS service. For anything that is going to actually move over to PaaS, there'll be a different process that we'll go ahead and create a different workflow for accordingly. But with that, we go ahead and we do the migration tasks with you, and we can schedule that. And the benefit here is Planet can do we can do multiple different things. We can either teach you how to fish, and then your organization can do it yourselves. We also provide hands-on consulting experience, so that way we can assist you in rapidly moving to the cloud. We do have a lot of customers that are sort of at end of life of data centers, and so does it make sense to invest millions upon millions of dollars in new hardware, new data center, or does it make more sense to take that investment and place it into resources that can assist us to rapidly get to the cloud fast? And then the last part might be is that a mixture of the two, where you want to do a lot of it on your own, but those workloads that get up into Azure, we just may not have the resources to manage all of it at the same time. And so we do provide a managed service that also enables you to have us assist you getting those workloads up there, but also manage those workloads after it's in Azure accordingly, and that's really on an IaaS perspective. With our phase 5 and phase 6 is really with our development teams. I don't have that slide included here, but the whole goal there with the phase 5 and phase 6 is really about workload transformation. How do we look at an application that might be a custom homegrown application, determine whether or not the difficulty of that to be able to migrate it into a true platform as a service or possibly a hybrid. A lot of our customers are looking at like GIS-based solutions, whether it be ArcGIS or OpenGIS, and saying, well, we really like to move that into Azure, but how would I go ahead and take advantage of, possibly as much PaaS as possible? And both of those type of solutions are more of a hybrid solution than it is a true full PaaS solution. But then there is other applications such as, we are looking at, homegrown applications that are complex line of business applications, might be entitlement systems, it could be public safety solutions that are all built on .NET, Python, PHP, Java, it doesn't matter, but our organization can help analyze and then also provide guidance to be able to migrate that workload from a traditional IaaS environment over into leveraging completely PaaS. So real quick here, as I only get about 6 minutes left, is really about what is this cloud assessment? Because a lot of my customers, especially the government customers, really ask me a lot of questions about, okay, this is great. You guys are providing us a framework on how to get from A to Z, and the steps are methodical and they're constructive and they build on top of each other and allows us to adopt based on budget as well as timeline based on our resources that are available. But the initial portion of this is really around that cloud assessment. How do we aggregate all this information? And so just so as everybody's aware, from the cloud assessment perspective, the information that is collected is strictly just going to be information that pertains to performance data, and then baseline dependencies, such as, we see that there is a SQL server or an Oracle server that's running. We won't have any idea of what the actual true application is, but we can see that workload has multiple dependencies that are reliant on it so meaning that if I move, let's say, this Oracle database up into Azure, I realize that there's 50 possible other workloads that are heavily reliant on that, and due to maybe our connectivity limitations, maybe we're not able to have a full express route implemented, maybe we're leveraging all VPN, maybe at that point I need to think about moving all of those additional workloads up there, and what would that require us to do, and how would we architect and move that forward? So realistically, when we're thinking about assessing the data center, like I mentioned, is about looking at your IT assets and having a complete discovery. This is an agentless implementation, so you as the customer actually will implement this with our guidance. The only thing that we're going to see is the actual data on the back end to be able to ascertain what those possible cost scenarios and cost estimates would be for your data center environment. The assessment usually takes about 10 days for us to be able to begin our analysis. So once we begin an ECR, we do a kickoff meeting, which enables us to have all the players in the room to meet each other accordingly. And then right after that kickoff meeting, which is usually about a half a day, we go ahead and we work with your engineering team to implement the assessment tool. So that way, the next 10 to 14 days, we're able to get enough raw data to be able to start seeing at least the dependency matrix and get an initial cost baseline. But then as we're continuing that engagement with the ECR, we're able, through time, as more data is being collected of historical data of ups and downs, peaks and valleys, we're able to actually now even right size those servers even more. So by the time that we get to phase 3, which is, how do we create the templates, how we're doing the right sizing, we're actually going to go back through all of the data again to determine, well, initially this was an F1 server, and now we're seeing that this is really D1 server, which could be, a 20 to 30% cost savings. And then we'll also look at that server from our workload process and determine, well, okay, is it truly a D1 or possibly can this be an A1? And we'll make those determinations together to be able to optimize and right-size that server completely. So again, the assessment overview will be a kickoff, launching the assessment accordingly, and then we'll be able to define the number of assets, define the number of application assessments we may need to do depending on what your organization needs. Maybe there's some complex applications that are statewide or countywide or institutionally wide that we need to evaluate to determine whether or not it could actually be migrated into Azure itself. Obviously, we'd be able to perform all the network mapping and application dependencies as well as the asset migration readiness and be able to provide all of this information. So all of this information comes back to you, a nice formatted document, as well as it kicks off everything for us to be able to move forward to make decisions on your virtual data center. And so realistically with that, our ECR offering, just so you're aware, we have a standard offering, and the offering includes everything I mentioned except for partial phase 3. And so when I say partial phase 3, this is really, we're providing a proof of concept. So we'll move anywhere from 10 to 15 virtual machines utilizing our methodology so that way you can see how it works. And typically for our smaller or less complex customers, the starting price that we're having here is a fixed fee of about $40K. And Microsoft funding may be available to offset this, just so you're aware. So that might be something, depending on your investment within Microsoft, that they may have funding available to offset some of this cost to do that initial engagement. Now, keep in mind, we are going, the $40K is the initial. Each customer could be slightly different depending on your complexity and also your cloud maturity model for your organization. So with that, I think, Bob, where do we go to next? Over to Jeff?
Yep. So I'll take it away. Jeff, you can go ahead and take ownership of the slides if you want. And welcome again. I think this is something that a lot of you have given positive feedback on. We're bringing our regular monthly update from Jeff Fowler around security. So Jeff, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Bob. So right now, what I want to talk about, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone, is talking about phishing and what Microsoft is doing to help protect you from such attacks. So a quick overview on phishing. I'm pretty sure everyone knows what this is, but just in case. Phishing is all about socially engineered attacks against you and your organization, your users, in a way that tries to usually come at you via email, and they purport themselves as reputable locations or sources such as your bank or things like that. And the real goal is to attack and gain control of your credentials from your sensitive information, such as PII or PHI, and usually has a sense of urgency to make you act really quickly to go after is, oh, I've got to take care of this. My bank says I have less than $100 off of my account. And you get a link that says, and it looks like a legitimate website for your banking institution, for example. And they've got all the graphics there. They've got the standard login page, and they want you to enter in your information, or maybe it comes from the help desk, supposedly, and it says, hey, there's a problem with your account. Please enter in your information to make sure we have your most current credentials. And I've seen examples of different customer locations where they've run phishing attacks against their own users to see just how well their training's taking across their user base. And it's usually pretty shocking when you see upwards of 30% of the responders to actually click on the links, A, and B, 10% to a third of those users actually put in some data. So it's a rather shocking and disturbing trend, but as you continue to educate your users, you can help protect yourself more and more, but really better tools also help tremendously to help protect you as well. And really, when you look at the full range of things that you need to watch out for with regards to the types of attacks you have coming in from your organization. You need to protect yourself. Make sure you have the right kind of security tools in place and services to protect your end users. From an IT perspective, you need to be able to detect those attacks against your staff. Find out if a threat has entered into your tenant or your enterprise, and find out who or what's been impacted. And then also responding. What do you do if you find something? How do you remediate the threat or the attack to return your tenant or enterprise back to a safe with no threat state? And really, as you look across the range of things that come across, sometimes they're spoofing legitimate things, sometimes they're using impersonation where they try to pretend they're somebody else, and sometimes it's content-based attacks with malicious links or attachments. So as you move through the phases of each one of these, for example, when you look at protecting yourself from an Office 365 perspective and phishing attacks, the 0-hour auto purge, or ZAP, as I like to call it, is one way of doing that, where the first time a new email comes in with an attachment, you have signatures in place, and those look for existing things that they know about. But sometimes it's a new attachment that your system's never seen before, or Office 365 hasn't seen before through ATP. So as it goes through, it hits the Office ATP service, and it does a detonation of the attachments. It runs through typical scripts, typical attacks, and will unpack a zip file multiple times until it gets to the root cause and execute the code that may be stored inside to find out if it actually is malicious or if it's a safe thing. If it does discover that it is actually a malicious payloaded within the attachment itself, it records the hash, and it's saved via the intelligent security graph across Microsoft to all of their services, and it's relayed to the AV filter of Exchange Online Protection. So in the very next time that same attachment comes through with another email, it'll automatically be protected. Now the great thing is that this isn't just for you. This applies to every single organization that uses Office 365 and ATP services. So if one of your peers or a random business in the market, anywhere around the world, sees this attack come through first, you may be protected from it the next time it comes around again. So now you never actually see it. I've seen examples where even a year ago, and they've improved on this since then, they had a brand new malicious attachment come through in a demo environment. They showed it what happens when it got stopped and blocked. It says, hey, this is a bad thing. Don't click on it. Don't use it. We've stripped it from you so you don't actually get attacked by it. And then they sent the exact same message through with the same attachment. And within a matter of seconds, it was picked up and stopped as a, hey, I know what that is. Let's not have this come through. Now, as you continue to move through the stack and services and what you need to do, of course, the next thing is to detect. So one thing that is new in ATP, they have brand new ATP real-time reports where you'll have visibility into all malicious emails that are targeting your tenant and blocked by Office 365. So this helps your admins that use ATP see all the emails have been flagged and submitted by their end users and as potential threats. So you can actually have user-reported threats, such as this thing here, this diagram here. You can show who reported it, the subject of the email, the sender, where it came from, the IP address, as well as the type of report it was, such as a phishing attack or not junk or whatever else. That way you get insight from both Office 365 and Microsoft, but also from users as well. And you can have reports over time so you can see as things change, and you get a better idea because really it helps your security teams understand what malicious emails are. It helps you to trigger the investigations on potential threats and impacts. And this allows you to have a comprehensive view for the breadth and depth of different types of phishing campaigns targeting your organization. And in addition, the user-reported submissions are also sent to Microsoft for further analysis as well. Moving on to the ability to respond, one new thing that just recently came out is the new Threat Explorer, which within the Security Compliance Center. And this allows you to look at different types of attacks, things that have occurred. It allows you to block things in the future. You can filter and search options such as sender or recipient or the subject, and several more to find malicious emails. And then also this also ties into the user reported threats view as well. which is really critical because emails that are part of a phishing campaign often come from unique sender address. So this helps you to filter things by sender to find emails sent from a specific email address. And once you apply that filter, any additional emails sent from that unique address will be displayed in Threat Explorer as well as the existing ones, so you know what's happening across the board in your organization. In addition, one brand new thing that just came out in preview this week, and just in the past few days, is the brand new ability to actually run the attack simulator tool. You'll find it within Threat Management. This is part of the built into Threat Intelligence and Office 365's E5 tier. What it can actually do is it allows you to actually run phish attacks against your users to see how well they're doing and how well the training is actually working for you across your enterprise. So you can use a display name spear phishing attack, which allows you to target a specific group or individual or organization. And you can customize these as well and see how well it works, as well as including such as, include the name of someone that your target recipient knows and trusts, and see how they do against attack when they think it's coming from a trusted sender. Another thing you can do is the password spray attack. And to help prevent bad actors from constantly guessing the passwords of user accounts, usually there's account lockout policies. So, example, you can generate numerous bad passwords are guessed for a user. But if you want to try one password and try it against every single account in your organization, it wouldn't trigger any lockouts, of course. So the password spray attack leverages commonly used passwords and targets as many accounts as you want to in your organization, with the hopes and perhaps fears that someone is actually using one of those common passwords. And that way, by running this attack against your user base in your accounts, you can find out where your weaknesses may exist in your organization and help prevent them in the future. Another way is that you can launch internally is your brute force password attack. And that's basically what happens when a hacker tries a whole bunch of passwords or passphrases with the hope of eventually guessing correctly. So this systematically checks all possible passwords and passphrases until the correct one is found, assuming that the account lockout policies don't kick in first, stopping these kind of attacks. And just for an example, here on this next slide, it's kind of blurry, but this gives you an idea of how you can craft one of these phishing attack simulators internally. So you can put in a graphic at the top, such as internal company logo. Let someone know that your payroll details need updates. Please click the link below to start the update. You can craft the text of the email itself. And on the left-hand side, you can see the actual HTML code itself. So you can make updates there as well, changing colors, changing fonts, changing things as well to comply with what you typically would see. And then once you finish crafting the emails to make it as realistic as possible for your user base to try to trick them, you can then send it against them and see how well they do. So this really gives the ability to look at how things are working. You can get reports to see who is vulnerable, who clicked on the links. You can try different campaigns over days, months, over the years to see what works, what doesn't work, and how best to future craft your training to make sure that your internal users are aware of phishing attacks, know the typical things to watch out for, and are prepared and as paranoid as possible to protect themselves against such attacks in the future from external sources. So that is it for me, but I want to let everyone know about the new threat intelligence and the new phishing attack simulator that just came out this week. It is in preview right now for E5 users, so if you look in your tenant, this will now appear, and you can also, of course, go to Microsoft Demos and get a demo tenant as well to try it out in case you don't have E5 yet. But at the very least, it is brand new. It is currently in preview, and it will be launching probably sometime this summer, I'm guessing, an official release. But it is quite a powerful tool, and if you're already paying for E5 as it is, you already own it, so why not take advantage of it? Bob, back to you.
Thank you, Jeff. And by the way, I had a customer that used it was a different tool at the time, but simulated the phishing attack in their own environment. It was a pretty substantial southwestern county, and several thousand users, and they had about 35% of the people take the phishing bait. right? So if you can think about that, that's hundreds and hundreds of potentially compromised accounts in your environment. Fortunately, it was internal and it didn't get them anything, but it can be absolutely devastating to your organization. So it's definitely a practice that I recommend. So just to finish up, talk a little bit about Azure Advantage. I like to say this is the brought to you by piece of the You Already Own It presentation. But Aaron referenced this a little bit when we talked about our managed services for Azure, right? So what's included in Azure Advantage? It's really about managing managing the foundational pieces of your infrastructure in the cloud, right? So all the way up to the application layer with phone support, email support for non-emergencies, things like data recovery, performance tuning and issues, with a series of daily, weekly, and monthly ongoing management things, including patch management and other things as well as that. So your systems are up to date, they're secure, they're being managed, they're running optimally. And taking all of that out of your purview. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for any questions out there. Do you guys have any questions?
So I have a question. This is Jim. I have a question on the security side. You had mentioned that this new feature is available on E5 as a preview. If we have ATP as an add-on SKU to an E3 license, will we see it there, or is it only on E5?
So this is part of threat intelligence, which is only available via E5, unfortunately. I have provided Microsoft feedback saying, hey, you should drop this down as a standard piece of Office 365 in the Security and Compliance Center, because this is something that I think all organizations need across the board. It's not really an option, and it'll help prevent customers having to go pay twice for something that they don't need to pay twice for. But unfortunately, it is part of threat intelligence, only part of E5. Although I strongly recommend to them to drop that down the tiers to make it accessible to everybody.
However, I can say that you can trial some E5 licenses and just at least do a little testing in your environment to see if it's something that, obviously it's going to work for you, but it's something, just to understand it better. And that is something you can do even in an active live tenant.
Yes, absolutely. And you can also, just as I mentioned earlier, go to Microsoft Demos and you can get a free free trial tenant, and you can test out in there as much as you like as well. Those are usually good for 30 to 90 days, depending.
Thank you.
Any other questions out there? This is your guys' call. I see a lot of the same faces. Are there any questions at all about the enterprise cloud readiness, or any more security questions, or other topics that are bugging or burning you? You got a good crowd of people who know the answers on the call for you today.
So I don't want to ask all the questions here, but I do have one other if I can. So on the Azure piece, do you find that from your experience, there are some low-hanging fruit that are just obvious choices to move to Azure as part of your process?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly are a number of things that are that come to mind, and they run the ranges a little bit, dependent on the customer environment, but things like, redundant identity infrastructure, domain controllers. If you're an Office 365 customer, your synchronization environment, things like that are clear potential single points of failure. Those tend to go early, as well as, and then there's really two places that you see things go, right? One is, your dev and test environments and all those. That's an obvious next one. And then it starts to go to one of two places, right? It's easy stuff that I can quickly move up there, right? And, that's great. We can checkbox and knock out a bunch of servers. But also, I find flipping the script on that is some complex environments that are difficult to manage in your data center, particularly in multiple particularly, if I have to have multiple data center environments to give it high availability and all of that kind of stuff. We actually find customers targeting a lot of these sort of substantial enterprise applications as a place to go. And while they're not, I would not call them low-hanging fruit. I would flip it to say highest value targets, right? And so a mixture of those gets numbers in sort of the easy stuff, but also high value in some of the hard stuff. And it's the stuff in the middle that also have extra complexities to them that tend to go last. Although what I will also say, Jim, is I'm really seeing a shift over the last, and I think Aaron would agree with me because he and I were just talking about this, over the last 6 months to a year, where customers are saying, the real value here is to take significant pieces of my infrastructure and put them in Azure, right? So it used to be, what do I need to do to get my toe wet, play around with some things. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That can almost always be a good thing. But then it's not about, sort of a plotting of a couple servers at a time. It becomes, okay, what do I need to do to get 75% of my infrastructure up there, right? And that change has really occurred in a number of customers we're meeting with and working with right now. So that's probably the biggest change too.
I would agree with you, and a lot of I think a lot of our customers are looking at the life cycle of their data center already, and does it make sense to continue investing in hardline items versus being able to actually create a life cycle for each individual VM or workload itself, so that way not only are we onboarding, but we have a provisioning and a deprovisioning process as well, so we know how long this is going to cost us to maintain and run, as well as when we see an end of life. So a lot of our customers are from that, again, mentioning before, that cloud maturity model, thinking longer term than an on-premise methodology.
Yep, and I want to point out, thanks for reminding me, George. George is one of our cloud strategists who also posted a 5 starter workloads for Azure blog out on our cloud strategist team blog. And we've put the link in the window there if you guys want to look and see what some of those might be. That's a great place to start. Thanks for reminding me, George. Any other questions? All right, I'll take that as a no. We'll make that a wrap. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you next month.